Well, today is Father's Day, and so we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 1, but I want to talk a little bit about the differences and talk about fathers a little bit. And we have fathers and we have mothers here, and I don't know, the church this size, we all had different experiences with mothers and fathers. My parents were divorced when I was very little. But we know we're the same, but we're different. Men and women are created equal under God. We see that in Genesis 1. God said, let us make man in our image, and he created them male and female. He created them together. But then we see in Genesis 2, it seems like they're created separately, but yet they're created to be a mate, to be helpers for one another. The woman was created from Adam's side. And she was created to be a mate, a helper to Adam, to be side by side, to work together. And so, while men and women were created together, and in salvation and in heaven, we are equal. But we are different. We have different traits. God didn't put us all the same as one. Women tend to love people as they are. Men tend to show their love by trying to help and fix one another. Now, we have to be careful because us guys, since we like to fix people, we tend to exasperate people because we start nitpicking. That's what Paul's admonition in Ephesians was. Don't exasperate your kids, because we tend to nitpick too much. We can get too fixy. But that's tend to what we do. At a marriage retreat I did, there was a video we showed. And in the video, the woman has a nail stuck in her head, right here. Just stuck right there. It's sticking out her head. No blood or anything. It's just there. And she's trying to talk to her husband about the pain she's feeling. And he's trying to tell her there's a nail in her head. She says, will you quit trying to fix it and just listen to me? I am trying to tell you how I feel. Just listen to me. And he's like, but you got that. Stop, Because that's what guys do. That's how God's blessed us. Right? We try to fix things. Sometimes we do it well, and sometimes not so well. Some of us fix well, and some of us not, and some of us don't. Some of us can fix cars, some can't. Some can fix other things, can fix computers, and some can't. We have different gifts. But that's kind of how we are built. And these are generalities, okay? Because not every guy is a fixer. There's some guys that couldn't fix anything. You don't want to ask them to fix anything. And some women are great fixers. But these are general trends, okay? So women tend to be just lovers of people as they are. Men tend to be fixers. Men tend to protect by standing in front of the family. Women tend to protect by wrapping their arms around them. So think about it. If danger comes, what's a woman doing? She wraps her arms around the kid. Guys are like, stand behind me, I'll protect you. Right? And you're going to fight off the bad guy. That's just the way we're built. Women tend to nurture. Men tend to teach. Men tend to be more logical. Women tend to be more emotional. But you know what? Us guys, we have emotions too. We just don't have an emotional vocabulary. We just can't describe them. It's kind of like trying to describe colors. Ask a guy what color something is. He goes, it's some sort of green, I think. And, these chairs, they're green, sort of. Don't ask me what color green. They're just green. Ladies, you probably could tell me exactly what color green they are. Tina says they're teal green. Okay? And, and some of you have green on, and I'd say Gloria's wearing green, and Cheryl's wearing green, but they're not the same green, and they're not the same green as the chairs. But I just called them all green. Okay? Mad, glad, and sad. What else is there? And some guys, they can do nothing. They can feel nothing. They go to that nothing box. And with ladies, you can't do that. You're like, nothing. How can you feel nothing? Sorry. We're just different that way. Long ago, when I was starting out in the ministry, I thought about going into prison ministry. And I actually visited a prison or two, and I was talking to the people who were doing the ministry there, and they talked about that on a Mother's Day, they decided to do a craft day and bring in materials and have the prisoners, the men there, make Mother's Day cards for their moms and mail them to their mothers outside the prison. And it was a big hit. All these big, gruff men are making Mother's Day cards. And they had a blast doing it. And they were just, it was like the talk of the prison. They thought that was such a big hit, let's do it for Father's Day. And hardly anybody showed up. And all those big, nobody wanted to make Father's Day cards. Why? Why? Studies have shown that men who don't have fathers are 3 to 20 times more likely to end up in prison. When I say don't have fathers, it could be their fathers are nowhere around, they're negligent, absent, or they're abusive. Now, it's not a guarantee, but it's just more likely. Fathers matter. They did another study kind of in another vein, not for prison, but for churches. They said, okay, what do parents have, roles do they have in children after they grow up? Do they come to church? And there was a study that was done, and they said, well, if both parents come to church, probably about 33% of the kids will end up going to church as adults. If only the mother brings the child to church, only about 2% of the kids will come to church. If only the father brings the kids to church, about 44% of the kids will go to church. 44 to 2. If only one of the two parents, if it's the father, they're way more likely to keep coming to church than if it's just the mother. But yet in our society, what do we do with fathers? Just watch a sitcom. That's who gets laughed at. It's the dads that get the jokes, the butt of the jokes, or the commercials. And if you go to a custody court, who gets the more honor, the mother or the father? It's always the mother. But yet, it seems like when we look at some of the statistics, it's like fathers seem to be important too. Now, does that mean mothers aren't important? Absolutely not. It's not an either or, it's a both and. However, in this world, it's not always both and. I get it. I was raised by a single mom. I get it. And just mothers and fathers were different. Just look how a church is how we treat Mother's Day and Father's Day, right? Mother's Day, we give mothers roses and flowers, right? They all get flowers, something pretty. Father's Day, what do we get? A book. I have gotten a book for Father's Day. Hey, all the fathers, here's a book, Man in the Mirror. It's like fathers, how to become, men, how to become better men. Why is that? Well, because men tend to be more practical. We're fixers, including fixing ourselves. And so we want something practical. A flower, that's nice, but what am I supposed to do with that? You heard the phrase, happy wife, happy life? Who came up with that? Men did. Why? What do we want at home? We want peace. We want to take care of our family. One thing that men don't do, because it's like an unwritten code. It's like, as a man, one thing you don't do is you don't burden somebody else. That's why men generally don't talk about their problems, because you don't burden somebody else with your problems. You take other people's burdens. Example of that is a married couple, and after they got married, every day they would make sandwiches for lunch before they left the house. And every time they got to the end of the loaf, the husband would always take that end piece, whatever you call it. I'll call it the heel. There's another name for it, but I'll call it the heel. And he would always make the sandwich and give it to his wife. And this happened for months, for years. And finally the wife says, "Why do you always give me the heel piece?" Like she's kind of disgusted by it. And he goes, "But that's my favorite piece of the bread out of the loaf." Now, is every dad that good? No. Are there deadbeat dads? Yes. And the good fathers want to beat up the deadbeat dads, okay? We want to take them out behind a barn and beat some sense into them. And so we're going to look at what ideal dads should be. Ideal dads teach. Ideal dads carry the family. Not every dad is ideal. Not every family is ideal. But Proverbs gives us a glimpse of what dads should be striving for. So we're going to look in Proverbs chapter 1. So this is the introduction into Proverbs. We're going to look at chapter 1, starting in verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth, knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning. A man of understanding will acquire a wise counsel. To understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Hear, my son, your father's instructions, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Well, I'm not going to get into verse 1. That's kind of easy. King Solomon wrote this. But verse 2, to know wisdom and instruction. Godly fathers teach knowledge versus wisdom. There's knowledge and there's wisdom. They're not always the same. To know wisdom and instruction. Knowledge is knowing how to do a thing. Knowledge is to know how to change the oil in your car. Wisdom is knowing how often to change the oil in your car because of the type of car you have, how you drive the car, the type of oil you use. And so you learn how often you need to change it. There's a difference. There's the knowledge of how to change it, and there's the wisdom of how often to change it. Knowledge is knowing there's an election coming up. Wisdom is knowing who to vote for. It's not always easy. Knowledge is knowing there is a God. Wisdom is knowing wisdom comes from fearing the Lord. When do you teach this stuff? If you look in Deuteronomy 6:7, it tells us. Actually, Deuteronomy 6:7 and Deuteronomy 11:19, those two verses are almost identical. They tell us when we need to teach this. And it says, when you sit in your house, when you walk down the road, when you lie down at night, when you rise up in the morning. So that covers most of the day, doesn't it? When do you do it? All day long, while you're doing things. when you're walking down the road, when you're in the house, when you're doing stuff at home, when you're getting ready for bed, when you get up in the morning. You're always teaching. You're always talking about these things. It's a never-ending cycle. To know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding. Now, the way Hebrew poetry works, those two lines, he's saying the same thing twice. It's a repetitive. He's saying the same thing in two different ways. To know wisdom, to discern. To know and to discern, those are two ways to say the same thing. But to discern things, it's not just to memorize them. It's to truly understand. It's a nuance. This takes time. It takes time. It's not a one-shot lesson. It's not, okay, you've had the lesson, check the box, you're good to go. It's not how that works. It takes many layers. There are many lessons. It takes much patience. It's not simplistic. But as you see here in verse 3, it's not just lessons, it's not just knowledge and understanding, but it's also behavior. To receive instruction in wise behavior. So to teach the head knowledge, the understanding, the discernment, but it's also to teach behavior. What kind of behavior? Well, that tells you exactly what behavior is in the next line. Righteousness, justice, equity. Your translations may use three different words there, but they're just going to be synonyms. Righteousness. Those are godly things. Godly behaviors. Like going to church, Sunday school, reading the Bible, learning how to pray, learning how to treat people right. But that kind of, the treating people right kind of goes with the other ones. Justice. Following the law of the land. Treating people well. But then equity, treating people fairly. Fairly is not always equally. Equity and equality are not always the same thing. That takes discernment. That takes knowledge. That takes wisdom. It takes time to learn that. A 3-year-old doesn't understand that. Why do they get a cookie and I don't? I don't, Why can't I eat the rat poison? It's not fair. They don't understand these things. It takes time to teach these things. It's slow. It's repetitive. It takes patience, which sometimes us fathers have trouble doing. And that's the conundrum of parenthood, is these traits that we need to have, we don't realize we don't have them until we have kids. And then God says, see, you need these traits. You need to have patience like I have. Think about how patient God is with us. And how patient are we with our kids? That's why grandparents tend to be more patient than parents. Because it's like, oh, well, I guess I could have been more patient when I was a parent. Now that I'm a grandparent, I can be more patient now. And I can give the kid back later. That's always handy. But it takes time. It's not always simple. It's not always easy. It's not always obvious either. It's not always obvious. Godly fathers teach knowledge versus wisdom. There's a difference. The second thing is godly fathers teach wisdom with skills. In verses 4 and 5, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth, knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning. A man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. To give prudence to the naive. Some translations may say to the simple. Well, who are the naive? Who are the simple? Well, it tells you in the next line, to the youth. The kids, they don't know what's going on yet. They're still learning. That's why we send them to school. Or we homeschool them. Because they don't know. They have to learn. And so we got to give them discretion or prudence. Discretion. So they're not a wild child. Well, you ever look at a 3-year-old? They tend to be pretty wild. A 5-year-old with ADHD, they're bouncing off the walls. They don't have any discretion yet. No. Well, by the time they're 15, hopefully they're starting to get some. And hopefully by the time you're 50, you got it pretty well figured out, mostly. Why does it take so long? Because we tend to be stubborn and thick-headed. All of us are. It takes time. But how do you know? The goal is to teach them to be a wise person. Teach and you to become a wise person. How do you know if you're a wise person? Well, it says in verse 5, a wise man will hear and increase in learning. A man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. A wise person seeks wise counsel. We'll see the opposite of that in a little bit. But a wise person seeks wise counsel. And they seek to understand. They pray for wisdom, as it says in James. It says, pray for wisdom. God will grant that. We see King Solomon. He prayed for wisdom. And then he wrote this book. He prayed for wisdom. So a wise person wants to learn. They want to learn not only wise things, but they want to learn a skill. They want to learn what to do in life. They just don't want to sit around and twiddle their thumbs. They want to do something with their life. They just don't want to play all the time. They want to learn how to do things. They want to be helpful. They want to be important. Not let's say the boss, but they want to have a purpose in life. One of the reasons I think that men, when they retire and they don't have a job to do, oftentimes they die rather quickly after they retire because they don't have a purpose in life anymore. Men are meant to work. And when they don't have a job, they don't have a purpose anymore, they don't have a will to live anymore. And so oftentimes that happens. Now, the men that live longer, they find things to do. They still have a purpose. They find things to do in their lives. Because that's just the way we're built. So godly fathers teach wisdom with skills. Number 3, godly fathers teach critical thinking abilities. Verse 6, to understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. To understand a proverb and a figure. How much of the Bible is written like proverbs? Some of them are kind of almost a riddle. Jesus, how did Jesus teach? He taught with parables. He wasn't plain and simple all the time. Some parables are easy to understand. Some have many levels to deal with. Think about just as you read through the book of Proverbs. You think, okay, I got that one kind of figured out. Okay, then read Ecclesiastes. Tell me if you got that one figured out yet. Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, depending on what translation you have. That one's kind of different too. Even the Psalms aren't always easy to figure out. There's many levels, many layers that it takes to figure out. I haven't got them all figured out. I still struggle with some of the parables of Jesus. But Proverbs is a great book because there are 31 chapters. When we added chapters to the Bible a few hundred years ago, They happen to make 31 chapters in Proverbs. And they're usually a lot of months or 30 or 31 days. So you can read a chapter a day. Not all the books are broken out that easily. And you can go through the book of Proverbs that way. And it's not always simple. The parables are sometimes in layers. You think like the parable of the prodigal son. And the first thing you think of is the wayward son that goes away and that comes back. And that's part of the parable. But then there's another layer. What about the other son? What's the meaning of the other son that never left? Have you thought about that one? I'm not going to give you the answer today, but that's not our sermon. But that's another layer to that parable to learn about and to talk about with your children, with your sons, with your daughters, and to learn about. And it's not always easy. It's not always, sometimes it takes some thought. Sometimes you have to ask somebody else or find a book to read. I say, search for it on the internet, but the internet is so hit and miss. You could hit a page that's really great, or you can hit a page that's kind of off the deep end. And I don't know what's in the deep end of that page. And so it's not easy. It takes time. It takes thought. And it's not always a quick thought. And just as we teach our children tasks and things, you don't always get it the first time. And so godly fathers teach critical thinking abilities. Number 4, godly fathers teach fear and faith in the Lord. Verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fear. What is that? Awe. Being awestruck. Awesomeness. Afraid to a degree. God the Father says, fear the Lord. God the Father, fear him. But fear is to be, actually that's where the word comes from, the meaning is to be in awe. To be awestruck with God. Yet in Romans chapter 8, in the New Testament, God the Father is called Abba, which is kind of like daddy. And it says he adopted us. And that we can go to him. And so he is in awe. He's God the Father. He's on his throne. He is the creator of the world. And yet we can come to him and tell him our deepest, darkest problems. Even as we're in awe of him. Because he is the creator and he's our daddy. And it's not one or the other, it's both and. Because he is bigger than that. And sometimes that's hard for us to grasp because really, for those of us on earth, oftentimes, and I've seen it over and over again, we tend to think of God the Father the way we think of our earthly father. And if we had a bad earthly father, we tend to think God the Father that way. If you had an absentee dad or an abusive dad, you kind of think God the Father's that way. You had a strict dad that was always nagging and you think God's that way. If you had a good dad that was a loving dad, then you think God the Father's that way. We just kind of do that by default. We don't even think about it. I don't know why we do. And many people do it of every different walks of life. But I've just seen that in many ways, in many areas, many people. God is the perfect father. He's also the perfect mother. We don't call him God the mother. The Bible never calls him that. But he has all the attributes of the perfect mother too. Jesus, what did Jesus say before he went to Jerusalem? He said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I wish to gather you like a mother hen gathers its chicks under her wings. God has all the attributes of the perfect father and the perfect mother. We don't have those attributes. God had to divide it up for us. So we got fathers and mothers. Because our bodies can't handle all that. He had to divide up the tasks. But God, he's the beginning. He's like, God, I don't know where to start. You start right here. You start right here. How do I fear God? What must I do to be saved? That's where you begin. What must I do to be saved? That's the beginning of the fear of God. What do you need to repent of? What do you need to correct? What relationship do you need to be reconciled with? That's the beginning of the fear of the Lord. You fear the Lord. You're awestruck with him. You seek him out. That wise counsel that we seek, it begins with seeking out God. Because if you don't seek out God, everything else is hit or miss. The fear of the Lord. It's the 7th verse in here, but it's really the key verse. It begins here, the fear of the Lord. And you start here, and you start following God, and you say, God, how do I need to fix this? Are you in awe over God's creation? Are you in awe over God's salvation? If not, ask for it. Seek it out. Verse 8 is our conclusion. Hear, my son, your father's instructions. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Both parents share in the teachings of our sons and our daughters. While it's Father's Day, mothers are not off. Are not off the hook. Everything that applies to fathers applies to mothers too. Well, we have some jobs in the families that are predominantly done by one parent or the other. Both parents should be able to do all the jobs because sometimes stuff happens. Dads can do laundry. Moms can mow the yard. Dads can change diapers, and moms can play catch. When I was deployed, I would run into dual military families where both spouses were in the military. And they had families. And when that happens, it usually happened in the reserve and the guard more than active duty. The Army would make sure that they didn't deploy both parents at the same time. So I ran into numerous families where both parents had got deployed at different times. So at some time or another, the mom had been deployed or the dad had been deployed. And I would ask them, I'd ask the mom and the dads at different times, which is harder, being the deployed spouse when you're away from home and you're overseas, or being the spouse that's at home with the kids and in the house? And all the men and all the women except one, there was one outlier, all of them said it's harder to be the stay-at-home spouse. Because they had to be mom and dad both. And sleep in a half-empty bed. When you're deployed, you're sleeping in a twin bed. You know where you're going to, you know what you're going to wear every day. You know where you're going to eat, and you know what you're going to do. All your decisions are made for you. Yeah, there's other stresses going on, but those basic necessities are all taken care of for you. And at home, you're taking care, and some things just get left undone. There are some jobs that just don't get done. And so, And I know in families today, it's not always easy. Not all families are functioning in two-parent homes. There is a parent that has left the home. I've done marriage counseling, and where one person said, I don't hate you, I just don't want to be married anymore. And by the way, that wasn't a guy. He says, I just don't want to be married anymore. What do you do? A marriage is not a 50-50 proposition. Did you know that? It's not 50-50. It's 100-100. Both people have to be given 100%. And it only takes one vote to kill a marriage. And so one parent may have left. One parent may have died. One parent may have gotten sick or injured and they can't function as well. Sometimes women become parents and they didn't desire that. That was not their choice. I'll just leave it that way. And so our world is a mixed bag. And we need to come alongside other families. As brothers and sisters, as the extended family of the church, as your extended family within your blood families. But no matter what, verse 7 applies. The fear of the Lord is the beginning. Is the beginning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning. That's where it all starts. Do you fear the Lord? Have you turned to him? Do you follow him? That's where it starts.